And again, just to give very quick introductions of myself and my colleague Olivia, I'm Charlotte Saul. I'm the pro bono manager at NIJC. So I work to connect attorneys at our law firm and corporate partners and various folks who are interested in getting involved in our work to the types of pro bono opportunities that we have. One of which we're going to talk about today, which is working on a full scope asylum case. I'm joined by my colleague Olivia. Olivia, if you could quickly introduce yourself and then we'll dive in.
Hi, I'm Olivia Judd. I use she, her pronouns. I am the managing attorney for NIJC's Asylum and LGBTQ pro bono projects. So that means that anyone who takes an asylum case, be it an LGBTQ case or another asylum case with us, will be receiving one-on-one technical assistance from either myself directly or someone on one of the teams that I supervise.
Great. So just to go over what we're going to cover today, this is not a training on asylum. We have a full training on asylum that we give, and that is required watching for anyone who takes on a case with us. But the goal is rather to talk about what NIJC and our model is. We'll give like the highest level introduction to asylum, which might be a review for some of you. And then we'll talk about what makes a case team successful when taking on an asylum case, because they're a pretty significant undertaking, what to expect, and then what next steps would be getting started. And if you leave this and say, actually, I don't think this is the right fit for me, that would still be successful to us, because the point is to make sure that anyone who's taking on a case knows what the expectations are. And maybe you say, you know, I want to do immigration work, but maybe there's a different case type and I can talk to you about that afterwards. But asylum is one of our greatest ongoing needs and an area where we think having representation can have a really meaningful impact in the outcome of a case, and especially in this climate where we're really prioritizing trying to place asylum cases when we can. There'll be time for questions at the end, but if questions come up throughout, we're a pretty small group, please feel free to put them in the chat, which Olivia will be trying to monitor since I'm screen sharing, or you can just jump off of mute as well. So very quickly, this is NIJC's mission. For those who are new to our organization, we work to establish and defend the legal rights of immigrants, regardless of background, and to transform the immigration system to one that affords equal opportunity for all. We've been around for about 40 years. Our service area is clients who are in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, but we do a lot of work with on like litigation work and policy work that serves people beyond our direct services area, service area. And then just to talk a little bit about our approach, we have direct legal services, which you see on the right here. That is the bread and butter of what Olivia and I mostly do. NIJC serves over 11,000 non-citizens each year in a number of different case types. Asylum is a big bucket of work that we do, but we also work with folks seeking a lot of other forms of relief. And we do this with our incredible staff, but also with our network of pro bono attorneys, where we have over 2,400 folks who are active with us, which we're very grateful for. That work is really bolstered by the work that our policy advocacy teams and litigation teams are doing, both locally here in Chicago and in the Midwest, but also nationally. And they're able to get a lot of information from our direct client cases that informs the systemic work that we're doing. And so there's a lot going on here for sure. And I think especially in the asylum side, we're seeing a lot of policy changes and really frustrating developments. And we're able to kind of distill from those trends and figure out how we can advocate to better serve like the folks beyond our clients who are going through the asylum system. And I mentioned this before, but just to again cover, non-citizens don't have the right to appointed counsel. And so the majority of immigrants going through the immigration system are unrepresented. But we know that when folks have representation, their cases are much more likely to be approved. There are varying statistics on this depending on kind of how they measure the numbers, but some places say like 60% higher likelihood of your case being approved if you're represented. We see that range all the way up to 10 times more likely to be represented. It depends on the case type. It depends on what circuit you're in, all of these factors. But we know even just from our experience that the work with a client on figuring out what aspects of what they experienced meet the legal definition and are the things that a judge will grant based on, that's something that having an attorney can really help you figure out and talk about in your case in a way that has a really meaningful impact on the outcome. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a bit. But just to give one more overview slide on NIJC, this is how we source our clients. We have a number of ways that folks can contact us for intake. That can either be through going to the immigrant court help desk that is at the Chicago Immigration Court and actually also at the Indianapolis Immigration Court. We get some referrals through other clients. It's a little bit patchwork, I would say, across different forms of relief. But once someone contacts us, we do a full in-depth case screening to make sure that they have a viable asylum claim. And then from there, if we accept the case, we sign a retainer with the client, and then we start looking for pro bono placement. So any case that we place, we have already done an in-depth screening of, and we've already chosen to represent that client, and we're currently representing them in-house. There are a number of reasons why we would look for pro bono placement. First of all, it allows us to free up more of our in-house capacity to take on a new client. So each case we place, in theory, makes us able to take on one additional client. But there are other reasons that we would decide that a case is well suited for pro bono attorneys. It could be the nature of the claim. It could be, say, that a client speaks an Indigenous language and we don't have budget for interpretation, and maybe a law firm does have budget for interpretation. And so we're trying to find the best fit to make sure that that client can have the representation that they deserve. Then we start looking for teams to take a case. And once we place a case with a team, and we'll talk more in detail about what those steps are, we remain of counsel and provide really involved technical assistance and support. And like Olivia mentioned, she's one of the people who provides that support. We'll talk more about what it looks. But just to preview, we don't expect anyone to have immigration experience when they volunteer with us. Our model is set up to support people who are committed and willing to give the time and the energy and like sit alongside their client. It does not mean that you have to have taken immigration law or done an asylum case before in order to do that work with us. So we'll talk more about how that looks. But first, Olivia is going to give the highest level overview of asylum.
Yes, thanks, Charlotte. And as Charlotte said, right, this isn't a training. We have really in-depth training materials available online, but I have a couple slides here just to make sure that we're all oriented on the type of relief that asylum is and what a case entails. And so the basis for asylum is here. I'm not going to read this out loud. We're going to break down the elements a little bit on the next slide. But what it's important to know, right, if you are working with an asylum seeker, you are working with someone, first of all, who's already in the United States and who is seeking protection due to a fear of return to their country of origin. So this is humanitarian relief for folks who are protection-based relief, I should say, for folks with a fear of return. And we are working with them once they have already entered the United States. And there are a couple different postures we might see that we'll talk about in a little bit. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm going to break down kind of the pieces of this asylum definition and talk about the elements that we're looking at when we are preparing an asylum case. So first of all, the person must have a well-founded fear of persecution, and persecution has a specific legal definition. There are certain types of harm that case law tells us rise to the level of persecution, and those are arguments that we're going to make. And the persecution either in the past has to have been committed by, or we fear it in the future, being committed by either the government itself or an entity that the government cannot or will not control. And that persecution has to be perpetrated on account of a protected ground. And so we're looking at, and these are elements that get conflated a lot, right? But when we're looking at protected grounds, there might be all kinds of reasons someone might seek asylum. And many of our cases qualify for more than one of these protected grounds, right? But they're race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. If you take a case with our LGBTQ project, you are by definition taking a case with a PSG argument, right? We see particular social groups as things like gay men from Guatemala, for example, gender nonconforming individuals from Ghana, right? Transgender women from Colombia, for example, would all be constructions of a particular social group. We also see other constructions like family-based claims, right? This is like a pretty wide net that this casts for folks who don't fall into one of these other protected grounds. And it can't be just anything, right? So one of the things our team does is we identify when we screen a case, what is the protected ground that is applicable, right, to this person? And these are things that we would help a team identify and argue. And then I want to go back to that on account of element, right? We're looking here, was the persecution on account of the protected ground? Did this person suffer harm because of were they targeted because of their political opinion? Were they targeted because of their membership in that group, maybe of LGBTQ individuals from Jamaica or whatever it is, right? We're tying those pieces together. And so these are the types of legal arguments we're making when we're briefing an asylum case. To give a really high-level overview of the asylum system itself, we have a visual on the next slide, talking about the different postures that our cases are in. First thing you'll see on here, affirmative asylum. These are typically people who maybe entered the United States on a visa, right? They entered. They are not, the US government is not trying to actively remove this person, right? They are affirmatively applying for asylum. They are seeking protection. That application is filed with the Asylum Office, which is under US Citizenship and Immigration Services. And those applications are adjudicated in a non-adversarial interview. NIJC works on a few of those cases. The timelines get a little bit complicated. They're not something that we place with pro bono partners super frequently, particularly these days. The majority of the cases that we work with pro bono partners on are defensive cases. Those are individuals who are in immigration court. The US government, for one reason or another, has initiated removal proceedings and is actively trying to deport that person, and asylum is being raised as a defense to deportation. Asylum is on the table to say, okay, maybe there is a reason why this person is removable, but you actually shouldn't remove them because that wouldn't be safe. They qualify for asylum and they should be allowed to stay and live in the United States. People can get into this defensive posture in all kinds of ways. It could be an affirmative case where they went to that interview and the officer wasn't able to grant asylum. Maybe they didn't have enough information, right? Maybe like Charlotte talked about, like the person was unrepresented and the officer wasn't able to check those boxes and match those facts of the person's case with the legal elements, right? And they just need a second bite of it at the apple, another chance to present their case with representation that can help the adjudicator understand how their fact pattern fits the legal requirements for asylum. It could also be that they encountered ICE or CBP somewhere along the way, maybe at the border at the time of entry. Maybe they were arrested at some point and transferred into ICE custody or otherwise came onto ICE's radar and were placed in proceedings that way. But that is the largest population of clients that we're working with are folks who have a case in immigration court, and we are presenting asylum as a defense against deportation. Now, after an immigration judge issues a decision, either party, so us representing the asylum seeker or the government, the DHS attorney, can appeal that decision. And if the decision is appealed, it goes up to the Board of Immigration Appeals. If a decision is appealed again from the Board of Immigration Appeals, it would go up to federal court and then eventually, were it to make it that far, to the Supreme Court. We have always seen, we have always litigated to some level in all of these spaces. NIJC has a really robust litigation team. For cases that we work on with pro bonos, we do ask for representation up through that BIA level should it become necessary. So we are putting forward our best arguments. We are often very successful in immigration court. If we don't get the result that we're looking for there, then we, assuming there are viable grounds for appeal, which there pretty much always are, right? We stay on that case to assist with the appellate litigation. And again, that's something that we provide technical assistance on. It's great when an attorney can follow through to the next phase of the case because they're the ones who are really familiar with the facts and with the client. So again, since this is just a really high level overview, if we move to our next slide, I can talk a little bit about what actually goes into putting together an asylum case, right? You've taken a client, you are working with them to prepare their case for immigration court. What are the things that you need to do? There are really three major buckets of evidence that you're preparing. The first is the client affidavit. This is the client's, and I always want to be careful to say, it's not the client's whole story, right? Our clients have really complex histories and are like complete individuals, and they are so much more than their asylum cases. It is the story of the reasons the client is applying for asylum. And it is organizing it in a way that is easy to understand and compelling to an adjudicator and in the client's voice, and lining up those facts of the client's case with the legal elements. We also have corroborating evidence. Those are country conditions documents that we've researched. It might be forensics reports, psych evaluations, letters of support from friends, maybe police reports, anything else that helps prove the truthfulness of our client's story. And then, of course, the legal argument, tying together the affidavit and the other pieces of evidence in with the case law and explaining to the adjudicator why this is a case that should be granted. And the reason it is in this circle here, right, it kind of has this cyclical representation, is because this isn't a linear process. We really encourage folks as they're working on a case to not just work up one piece and then start on the next and then do the third piece last, right? These all really affect each other. As you develop the affidavit, you will start to be able to think through the legal theory and what kinds of corroboration do we need and what kinds of arguments are we going to put forward. And as you get evidence, you're going to find things in the evidence that make you say, oh, I'm learning more about this thing that happened. I need to add some more detail about that to the affidavit. As you work on the brief, you might realize there's a line of legal reasoning that makes you want to have certain kinds of documentation in your evidence or certain kinds of information in your affidavit. And so these are all things that are worked up in conjunction with one another throughout the lifespan of the case. Which brings me to the lifespan of the case. Charlotte has already kind of previewed some of these steps. This is the start to finish of what a case looks like at NIJC. Charlotte explained our intake process. Someone comes to us, we have a meeting with them, we make sure that they have a viable claim, we screen their case, we get any initial documents that they have. We help them get that asylum application on file if it hasn't already been filed. Then, just like was shown in the last flow chart that Charlotte had, hopefully we place that case with a pro bono team. And that is where you join us. Once the case is with the pro bono team, you're meeting with that client, you're working up the case, you are preparing that affidavit, gathering corroborating evidence, drafting the brief, just like we talked about on that last slide. You are also monitoring it. You're checking online to see if the hearing date has changed. You are helping your client renew their work permit as needed. You're attending any status hearings with the court to check in with the judge and to navigate the next steps. And then, of course, you're working towards the big day, the asylum merits hearing itself, at which you prepare your client to testify, you file all your information in advance, all your materials, and you show up and you present the case at the hearing. You might receive a decision the day of the hearing. You might wait. You might be on the case for a while longer as we wait for a written decision for the judge. And then whenever that comes, we help you navigate the next step. If the decision isn't favorable, the next step is an appeal, and we keep fighting for that case and we guide you through it. If it's a grant, which is also really wonderful, then you're getting this card. It's called an I-94, and it is it is not like the most exciting way to, right? Like you have your big win, you celebrate, and then you have to wait for this little piece of cardboard in the mail. And sometimes you have to make a bunch of phone calls to make sure that your client gets it. But that is the piece that your client has forever, that doesn't expire, that shows that they have asylum. It proves that they can have an unrestricted Social Security card. They don't need a work permit to get a job. It is the piece that unlocks their ability to access their rights as an asylee. And so that might be your kind of final administrative step after a grant, is ensuring your client has all their appropriate documentation to exercise their rights as an asylee. And then once we have that, we work with you to close out the case and your role has ended. And so with that, oh, I'm going to not pass this over to Charlotte. I'm going to keep going. Sorry about that. I'm going to finally, for my last slide here, break down what this looks like when you're on a case, right? Like, what is NIJC doing and what is a pro bono attorney or pro bono team doing? Our team provides training materials and samples. If you haven't explored our website yet, I encourage you to do so. We have a lot out there, and we have a whole treasure trove of kind of internal samples and guidance that we share with teams throughout the lifespan of a case. We review your materials. So anything that's going to be filed, we review it in advance, we provide feedback, we work with you to make sure it is polished up and the strongest it can be prior to filing. We keep you apprised of policy updates. I'm sure you've all seen things are moving quickly these days, right? There are a lot of policy updates. And so this isn't something, if you're working with us on a case, that you are solely responsible for keeping abreast of like the ever-changing immigration law, right? We are here for that. We reach out and let you know if there's something that's affecting your case. We are of counsel on our pro bono cases, and NIJC provides malpractice insurance coverage. That's us. Here's what we need and expect from our pro bono partners who are on a case. We would love for you to review those training materials, right? We've put a lot of work, we've put a lot of love into them. They have a lot of valuable information. Please utilize those resources on our website and that we share with you. It's also really critical to stay in touch with the client, to use appropriate interpretation. This means regular contact, even if the case isn't super active, having check-ins, knowing if they've moved, kind of knowing what's going on in their lives and making sure that they know that you're still there for them. You're preparing the case. As I said, we'll provide feedback on materials. That means that we need you to send them to us, right? So coordinating with us for timelines and making sure that you are sending materials far enough in advance that we are able to provide constructive review. Representation before various agencies, right? So our clients might have needs in multiple spaces. They have their case in immigration court, but their work permit is being filed with USCIS. Maybe they need to appeal to the BIA, right? And you are their advocate. Your representation is limited to the asylum case, but that might still include advocacy before multiple agencies. And then finally, let us know timely, please, what's going on in your case. Are you filing? Did you get that filing in? Has there been a decision? Because only with that information can we help guide you to the next step. And as Charlotte has said before, and as I will affirm, immigration experience is not required. We are here for that. What we need are smart people who are committed to the work to join us in providing excellent representation for these clients. And with that, I will hand this over to Charlotte.
Thanks, Olivia. So we have just a few slides left, but the next thing I want to talk about is what makes a successful pro bono team and kind of why. So this has a couple bullets here. The first is that we typically recommend 2 to 3 attorneys on a given case. The reason is because people leave their jobs, or they go on leave, or something comes up, or you're going to trial, and that could be at a time when your pro bono case is also moving. And so we find that having 2 people on a case or 3 people on a case usually ensures the best flow throughout the life of the case. There's often one person who's taking more of a front seat, or maybe you're splitting up who's working on which thing. We find that it works best in a team. At least one of those attorneys has to be based in Illinois or Indiana so that they can meet with the client in person. Not every meeting has to be in person, and we encourage you with your client to figure out what works best in terms of the way that you meet. But we do require that there be someone who can meet in person and who can go with them to their hearing and to master calendar hearings and the other things that come up throughout the lifespan of a case. I think a few of you here are corporate attorneys. Our model is that we love working with corporate partners, but the requirement, with like very, very few exceptions, is that there has to be a law firm partner and that the law firm would hold the case file. That is, again, because once we hand over one of these cases, it's the firm's case just as much as it is ours. And we want to make sure that, let's say the attorney were to leave, that the firm is handling the matter moving forward. We don't really have the capacity to reabsorb a case, and hopefully the team would want to stay on it throughout the lifespan of it. But as Olivia mentioned, it's a little unpredictable sometimes how long these cases will last. I don't think we covered this exactly on that timeline slide, but we typically try to place cases when there's already a merits hearing set, and where that merits hearing is somewhere between 6 to 12 months out. We think that's a good amount of time for a team to have to work up a case. But it could get pushed, it could get delayed. The judge could leave the bench, which is something that is happening right now. And there could be an appeal process, right? Like we don't know with exact certainty how long a process will be, even as much as we might try. So that's a good reason to have 2 to 3 attorneys, and then also to make sure if you're a corporate in-house attorney, that you're partnering with a law firm to work on the case. And the law firms are often very open to doing this. If you have questions about that, you can come to me and we can talk through who might be good to contact. But you also can go to a firm that your corporation works with. The next thing you need is approval from your firm or from your corporate pro bono department, both for the resources required and for the time required, right? And that's, again, because the case stays with the firm when the pro bono attorney leaves, if the pro bono attorney leaves. The third thing is access to budget. And these are a few things that could require some budget. And as Olivia and I mentioned, once we refer a case to pro bono, we are expecting the firm and the team to figure out how to move it forward. And there's some things that cost money, right? There's interpretation expenses. We may have a list of some interpreters you can contact, but also many firms have a way that they usually hire and work with interpreters. It is a best practice to find one interpreter who is like going to continue working with you on the case so that you can build rapport with that interpreter and the client together, but that's not always necessary. Our clients speak a variety of languages. We have a lot of Spanish speakers, some French speakers, and then also some rarer language speakers as well. We would work with you in figuring out what case is the best fit to make sure that the interpretation piece is something you're able to think through. So for example, we have firms that don't have a huge budget for interpretation, but will let their support staff who are fluent Spanish speakers be an interpreter on a case. We are totally fine with you working with someone who is not an officially certified interpreter, as long as they're fluent enough and we have a training video they can watch. That might mean that you say to us, we can take on a case, but it has to be a Spanish speaker. That's the kind of thing we want to talk to you about in advance, so we find the case that's the best fit for you all and for the client. Some other things that might require resources on your end are if the client needs expert witnesses for that corroborating evidence piece that Olivia was talking about. This could be a country conditions expert who can speak to why being gay in Guatemala makes someone eligible for asylum. It also could be a psych eval for a client, and when that is a crucial piece of their testimony. Again, these expert witnesses sort of vary in cost, but it is something that when we're placing a case, we'd want to talk with you about if we think it might need an expert witness. And the third thing is filing fees. There have always been filing fees related to a lot of immigration cases, but as of the budget reconciliation bill that passed earlier in the beginning of July, there are some new filing fees for asylum seekers and for work authorization for asylum seekers. This is something you and your client could talk about. Some clients might be able to cover it, but we do just like to say up front that there are resources that you may be able to tap into that both NIJC and very likely our clients won't have access to. And it's one of the benefits of placing a case pro bono. And the last and I think most important thing is time commitment, but also just regular commitment. Like asylum cases take time. They are not super predictable. And for that reason, having an attorney is all the more important, but you really need that attorney to be along for the ride with you. And I think our clients feel, when they feel like they have that team that's their advocate, that really hears them out, believes them, and is working to advocate with them, that is when our model is working at its best. So once you take a case, we do expect you, barring extenuating circumstances, to see it through, and we'll be there along the way to support you in that. And I'm just briefly going to talk about this. I'm not going to go too in detail. I'm sure you've all seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before, but all this to say that our clients have experienced a tremendous amount, and they have many needs that are maybe more foundational than their legal cases, at least at certain moments. We have clients who are experiencing homelessness or who have experienced abuse, who are really traumatized. They may not have like any sense of community here, all of those sorts of things. And so it's obviously very different than the work many of you are used to doing day in and day out. And part of your work as a pro bono attorney is to really meet your client where they're at and figure out, okay, I'm trying to help you move this case forward. Like what do we need to do to make that possible? Is it meeting at a time that's convenient for them? Is it making sure there's snacks available when you meet? Like thinking about those sort of things that are sort of extra legal, but also recognizing when they're the limits of what you can provide, because you are just their attorney. And so if things come up that are beyond the scope of your legal representation, we may be able to make referrals for psychosocial support or something like that. And that's another resource or reason that you should tap into NIJC's support as you represent your client. Okay, and then I think this is my last slide, which is on getting started. So these are the very practical steps to get started with a case. The first is to watch the recorded asylum training that's on our website, and to review our pro bono guidelines. That goes over a lot of what we've covered here. If you're ready to take a case and you've gotten that approval from the pro bono department at your firm or at your corporation, then you email me and say, I want to take a case. And you can share what specifics you want me to consider. So for example, if you speak French and you're like, I want to work with a French speaker, then I don't need an interpreter. You should tell me that. I can try to find a client that's French speaking. Or for example, let's say you're going to trial in November, so you want to make sure the hearing date for this isn't until the spring, something like that. We have a long list of cases for which we're seeking representation, and we want to work to find what's a good fit. So I would send over usually 2 to 3 blurbs for clients for you to read through and say, okay, I think this one looks good. You select that case, then I'll loop in one of my colleagues who will send over the conflicts information. And then once conflict's clear, we'll prepare and send you the case file, and we'll connect you to the attorney who's going to provide technical assistance. So like you'd get your case file and you'd say, and you'd get an email saying, and this is Olivia, and Olivia is going to be your point of contact at NIJC. At the same time as we're getting you set up with your TA attorney and with your case file, we're calling the client to say, look, you have a new pro bono team that's representing you, because as I mentioned earlier, until that point, they would have been represented in-house by someone on our team. So we have to explain to the client, we found pro bono representation for you. They're reviewing your materials. They're going to reach out to you in the next week or 2. That's how we manage the handoff, because we want to make sure once you take a case that the clients are going directly to you and that you're building that rapport directly with them. You come to us when you have questions, but that the main relationship is directly between you and the client that you're now representing. And then you start building rapport, beginning your work together, and working on all those aspects that Olivia was talking about. So that's our process and a little bit of what to expect when working with us. We're going to stop sharing the screen now, and I'm even going to stop recording, and then I can see if folks in the room have any questions.